Hello and welcome to episode 26 of series 2 of the Engaging Internal Comms podcast. This is the show for employee engagers and internal communicators who like to keep up to date with all that is new in our profession. My name's Craig Smith from The Big Picture People. If this is the first time you've listened to Engaging Internal Comms, you're more than welcome. We have a number of episodes at our website, engagingic.com, from this series and also the previous series. So you're more than welcome to have a look through our back catalogue and listen to some of our other episodes that you will find of interest. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast via your podcast platform of choice. However you're listening to this podcast, if you subscribe to it, it just helps us to improve our visibility, our listenership, and just creates a bit of critical mass that we're looking to try and get so we can get more and more listeners and more guests to contribute towards the show. Okay, so on that note, what we've got coming up in the next couple of episodes, in the next episode, which is on the 12th of October, we have an interview with Kirsty Bowen from the Coventry Building Society. Those of you who are involved in the IOIC, Institute of Internal Comms, may know Kirsty or have come across Kirsty before because she's heavily involved in the IOIC. And Kirsty is going to be sharing with us all about the IC lessons that we can take from the pandemic that we've all been experiencing for the last year and a half. Kirsty's got some really kind of profound experiences and profound learnings and lessons that she's taken from this whole experience, and we'll be sharing those with us, I think, in a really powerful episode, a really great conversation that I had with Kirsty. So I look forward to be able to bring that to you on on episode 27, which, as I say, is on the 12th of October. And then following that, on the 26th of October, I have an interview with Brian Landau from Venly. Now, Brian reached out to me. He has his own podcast, and which is really interesting. It's called The Drip, and that's all about internal comms, and we'll be giving you some links to that in that episode, so you can find that. But he's got a particular interest in audio and how audio can be used as an internal comms channel, and he's going to be telling us all about the role and importance of audio in internal comms, and that kind of builds on some of the episodes that we've had earlier in this series, which have been about podcasting, internal podcasting, and how you can engage people through audio. So it kind of builds on that, and Brian's got some different perspectives on that I think will add some additional value to that. So I hope you'll find that of interest. As I say, that's on the 26th of October. That episode will be going out. Just wanted to let you know about our event that we're running on the 4th of November, which is 4th of November 2021, that is, and just in case you're listening to this sometime in the future. That's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 p.m. UK time, and it's a webinar. It's a free webinar. It's called Helping Employees Understand Your Organization's Big Picture. And the kind of premise behind that is that most business leaders find it quite difficult to explain their mission, their vision, their values to their employees. And that's usually because they're quite close to the detail, they're quite connected with it, they're quite engaged and invested in it themselves. And it sometimes makes it difficult for them to articulate. But as we know, and I'm sure you know, if leaders are good at doing that, if they're good at connecting people in the organization to that bigger picture, then you tend to get employees that are more engaged, more connected, more able to contribute there and bring their full selves to work. So we're going to be looking at what are some of the challenges that the leaders face when they're trying to do that sort of thing, but also what are some of the techniques that you can use to communicate the often inherently complex messages involved in that big picture. So that's a free webinar, as I say. It's on the 4th of November 2021, 3 p.m. UK time GMT, and you can access that via our website, which is thebigpicturepeople.co.uk. And if you go to the website and you go to our events, you will find that event listed. We have a number of events, but you'll find Helping Employees Understand Your Organization's Big Picture, 4th of November. You'll be able to click on the link there to book directly, or if you want some more information before you do so, you can click on that, and then you can also then from there go to the booking link, which is via a Zoom webinar. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for that. If you know anyone else who might be interested as well, please let them know. If you have a look at the link and you think, that I know someone who might be find that of use, then feel free to send that link to them, and that would be great. So I think that's all from me. Let's move on to the guest for today's episode. An area that internal communicators often talk about or want to find out more about is how do we measure our contribution? How do we measure the impact of our internal communications and employee engagement work? So that was an area I wanted to explore with my interviewee today, who is working in a very large organization with lots of employees, very diverse organization, but has got a real focus and an emphasis on how to measure the impact of her work within the organization. So what we're going to be exploring in this conversation is, first of all, why measure? Why is measurement important and why should we care about it? And I think many internal communicators already know that and get that the return on investment has to be justified, that we have to kind of prove that we are delivering an impact through our work, both in terms of gaining more support and sponsorship and resources that we need to be able to do our job, but also because we want to know that the work that we are doing is actually getting through to our audience. But also, how do we then make sure that we're not just relying purely on numerical quantitative data, that we're actually getting qualified information that backs up what people are saying or why people are saying it. So we have both the data, but we also have the insights into why people are asking for what they're asking for, or why people are reading or more gravitating towards different types of content, and maybe steering away from others. So I think it's really important to understand that. And I think what we've also got with today's guest is a real depth of understanding and experience in effective internal comms, but also particularly in this area of measurement and measuring impact. With more than 15 years' experience in corporate communications and public relations, in addition to an extensive experience in managing and developing content for various companies' internal communication endeavors, Andrea Scarpula is currently Head of Communications at Americas at DHL. With 400,000 employees in more than 220 countries worldwide, DHL connects people and businesses securely, reliably, and enables global sustainable trade flows. Hello, Andrea. How are you?
Hello, Craig. Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And just for our listeners, whereabouts in the world are you at the moment?
Yes, I'm currently based close to Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Wow, excellent. That conjures up all sorts of evocative thoughts of being in Florida at the moment. When it's quite warm in the UK at the moment, but I'm sure it's a bit warmer in Florida at the moment.
Oh, yes, it is.
So anyway, I gave a bit of an introduction there to your role at America's DHL. Tell us a little bit more about your role, how many people you're responsible for from an IC perspective, and kind of some of the ideas, some of the tasks that you're involved in, your remit at the moment there.
Sure, yes. So I had internal communications for our cross-business unit campaigns and initiatives in the Americas. And one of our cross-business unit initiatives that I'm currently working on is our DHL Made in the Americas podcast. So that covers, topics, impacting the 21st century workforce, from leadership, different topics, women in logistics, that sort of thing. But I also, I'm communications lead for DHL e-commerce solutions. So that includes, managing internal communications as well as media relations for the division.
Wow.
So I keep busy.
Yeah, definitely. And your podcast, that's obviously an internal podcast that you're running at the moment, yeah?
It started as an internal podcast, but it's now also available on our DHL.com website and on Spotify and Apple. Yes, we had some content that we thought is that can also be very relevant to others. Like I said, it's really general business topics and for the 21st century workforce. So we decided to go external with it.
Okay, I'll put some links into the show notes, so if people want to have a listen in, no, we've just done a couple of episodes recently actually on podcasting as an internal comms channel, but that's really interesting that you're using it also externally as well. So I guess that's a really, really nice way of meeting both of those requirements, I guess. So so when we spoke originally and we kind of lined up the interview, one of the things that you mentioned that I was really interested in talking about, and particularly as this was something you're passionate about, was I think the perennial challenge for many internal communicators, which is how do we measure our impact? How do we prove our value? How do we, show that we're delivering that return on investment the organization has made in us? So just before we get into the detail of that, I know that's something you're really passionate about. Can you tell us a little bit more about why that's something that is close to your heart?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's a topic that all internal communicators should care about. But measurement for me, I have a sociology background, and I just love,
Mm.
surveying, focus groups, really data.
Yeah.
But I think that if we don't measure the impact of our work, we won't know what is resonating with our employees and where we can improve.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's quite interesting because I think I think that you did that for me. A lot of internal communicators I know and have probably come into internal comms maybe through kind of
Mm.
media and journalism and marketing and whilst they do have a kind of a leaning towards measurement, it's not sort of. But with sounds like with you, that's like kind of you're really kind of. It was one of the kind of prime interests that you have in comms. Obviously, apart from the comms itself, is to measure that impact and know what's
Exactly.
happening. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So again, I mean, let's start to think about how and why we do that then. And I mean, before we talk about maybe some of the tools, I mean,
Mhm.
how does having an emphasis and a leaning towards measuring your contribution, do you think, why is that important for internal communicators to be thinking about? Because you've got a lot of experience in that area, and as I say, sometimes I think it's often an afterthought, and we do everything by gut feeling, intuition, and think that well, it's just the right thing to do. We can't really measure it. It's kind of fluffy and soft, and why would you sort of advocate otherwise in that context?
Yeah, I would say, tracking internal communications, it also helps us measure employee engagement in other parts of the
Mm,
organization. How engaged are our employees? And also not just for reporting's sake, but we want to be able to tangibly, say, okay, well, this we're showing that we want to, if we have our leadership telling us there's certain messages we need to get out there. So how do
mm,
we know if we're really getting those messages out there if we don't hear from our employees? Are they really capturing the message? Are they putting it into action? So the only way to do that is through at least coming up with measurement or metrics that can work for us. And I think
mm,
that our metrics really, it's very, it has to be tailored to each company, what they
yeah.
want to measure. So there isn't a formula that any company can use across the board. It has to be very tailored, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree. So let's go through maybe some of the tools that you're using at the moment to measure the impact of the comms that you're putting into the organization, and maybe maybe if we look at maybe start with maybe the more simple tools, and then maybe up to the more
Mhm.
kind of complex and sophisticated kind of tools. So what are some of the more straightforward, simple tools that maybe other
Right.
people are familiar with us at the moment as well?
Right, right. Yeah. I think that at the moment it is important to have consistent KPIs in place. So, what I
Yeah.
use, I have an internal communications platform that provides me with email analytics. So, I
Okay.
think that's like my basic tool that I use on a day to day basis. But some metrics that I have in place that I obtained from this platform is the click through rates.
Yeah.
I want to know, are employees clicking on the newsletter stories I'm putting out there, or announcements, videos that I'm including in all my email communication. And
Mm,
I'm not really interested in open rates because, I think that an employee can open an email and immediately close it. So I really want to look at those click through rates because they're taking the time to go through, click. They want more information. They're
mm,
taking that extra step, right? So also the platform that I use also provides me with read, skimmed, and glance rates. And I'm
mm.
particularly interested in the read rates. And that
Yeah.
has to do, with the amount of time that the employee is spending with an email or newsletter open on their laptop. So,
Yeah.
so I really want to see that. And then I'm also interested in trending topics, in particular for my newsletters. And
Yeah.
what are those topics that employees were mostly interested in reading? So that gives me a good idea of what I should continue moving forward with it, in the future for future newsletters. And if I have videos, I also measure views, and
Mm,
comments are really important.
yeah.
Because I think that shows a certain level of engagement. If the employee is taking the time to include a comment or a question, you have that two-way communication. going on there. And also, I just started this year classifying my trending topics into 5 categories. So I'm
Okay.
looking at leadership, values, employer of choice, future, and strategy.
Yeah.
So
Excellent.
yeah, and these categories are really aligned with engagement drivers that we measure at DHL every year in our annual company-wide employee opinion survey. So that's why I was saying before, our metrics have to be very tailored to our specific
Yeah.
company. So in that case, I'm looking at these employee engagement drivers that the company has already identified.
Okay.
But I'm categorizing my trending topics. So yeah,
Yeah.
and I would say lastly, aside from all that, I also look at key outcomes.
Yeah.
Did I accomplish what I set out to do with a particular campaign? For example, did I meet my goal of having X number of employee submissions or participation in a certain campaign?
Mm, mm. And that's really interesting because I mean I know you weren't just talking only about email there, but it was interesting you were saying there about email, and it's because I mean that has been something from a external marketing perspective that's been around
Mm-hmm.
for a while. Kind of autoresponder and also tracking click throughs and cookies, particularly on external emails
Mm-hmm.
to clients or potential clients. So I think I kind of I knew this existed, this technology, but now about how internal emails are being kind of tracked and measured in the same way. So you can produce KPIs around well, as you say, open rates, maybe more superficial. It's more
Mm-hmm.
clicks and engagements and that sort of thing. When you're talking about comments and looking at trends, is that where you're looking outside of email and using other platforms where people are searching for things, or is that within a kind of an email environment or a kind of an intranet environment that you're using that?
Um, Yeah, so I'm looking more at our intranet to see
Yeah.
because my newsletters are linked to our intranet.
Right.
So I
Okay.
do look at that. But we also have Yammer internally, so
Yes.
people can post. We ask,
Mm.
sometimes when we have internal campaigns, we ask our employees to post on Yammer. And there's people who also comment on what's being posted. So I also measure that as well.
Okay. And do you just, I guess you compile all of this into some sort of KPIs and report or dashboard, or how do
Yes,
you report
exactly.
that back into yeah, okay. Yeah. So
Yes,
you have you have
exactly.
like
I
a
do put
monthly
together a
report, yeah.
report.
Mm,
Exactly. Yes,
okay.
I
And
do put together a quarterly report, actually. I think it helps me just look at the trends quarter over quarter. So, yeah, it's more
mm,
manageable, I
mm.
would say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, very, very much. And again, that's again, it's very similar to, I guess, a good marketing practice as well. Which I always think there's a
Hmm.
strong, although people don't always like to talk about the connection between, what as internal communicators, there is a strong emphasis of the kind of communication that marketeers are wanting to do as well. It's about kind of connecting people to our vision and our direction and purpose, isn't it? So,
Absolutely.
any other tools that you use? So you've given us a really interesting cross section. Are there any other tools there that you find particularly
Sure.
useful when it comes to measuring? Yeah,
Yeah, so I know at the beginning you had asked about more sophisticated methods of measurement. So something that I like to do, and I highly recommend, is conducting internal communication surveys.
yeah,
And you can use free or very inexpensive software like SurveyMonkey. But
yeah.
I do have to say, if you're going to conduct a survey and not act on the results or do something with the data provided, it's best that you don't even conduct the survey.
Yeah,
There,
yeah.
yeah, there can be a lot of data when conducting a survey. So, you can try to keep it to just a few questions to get at the heart of the feedback you want from the employees. But, and that, pulse surveys are good for that. They come in
Mm,
handy for just a short a survey. But I, I've carried out for the past few years, once a year, a 10-question survey to understand what topics are of interest to employees. What do they
yeah,
want to read more of? Their preferred channels for internal communications. I always include open-ended questions. So these surveys, they really help me to shift how I present information. It's given me some really important insights that I can also share with our leadership team. So
okay.
I highly recommend it. But if you do the survey and you don't act on it and if employees are asking for something, you don't do anything with it, then it really just doesn't make sense just to have the
Yeah.
data as a good to know. But
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think managing expectations about what you're going to do with what they tell you is really important, isn't it? Um,
absolutely,
so
absolutely.
yeah, let's maybe talk about that then. In terms of once you've got that data, then I think you've said you kind of compile that into a report, particularly from your kind of email data and also your intranet traffic.
Hmm.
But then also, how do you make sense of that? Because I guess I mean maybe this is leaning more into what you've just been talking about there with the surveys and I think when we spoke on, well, I know when we spoke originally, we talked about the fact that you can get a whole bunch of data, but you could kind of read it one way and make sense of it in a way that actually isn't what people are asking for or are saying. It's very
Hmm.
easy to kind of think
Yeah.
to look at survey data and think, oh, they want this, but actually they weren't taught. That wasn't there in their minds. If they as it were.
Yes.
So how do you? I think you talked about focus groups and kind of really trying to make sense
Hmm.
of getting the qualitative data to back up or information to back up the data. Is that what you would tend to do?
Yes, so I've also done that in the past where I've conducted employee focus groups just to
Mm,
complement my internal survey. So it's really helped fill in the gaps with regards to internal channels and topics. And with the focus groups, it allows you to probe a bit more and gather that qualitative data that you might not be able to capture if you don't get a lot of feedback or comments in your open ended questions. And sometimes it could be a matter of maybe not a formal focus group, but if
yeah,
you're out there talking to employees, asking them a couple of questions and just saying, hey, can I pick your brain for a second? I'd like to know, did you see that announcement that went out or that video? What did you think? What do you think we should
mm,
do more of? Or just really gathering that information in an informal way as well helps. But I have conducted formal, actually via phone, focus
mm,
groups with a couple of
yeah.
people. And although it's not as effective, I think, as face to face, but it also does help and fill in those gaps that the survey, just to complement the survey, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, and so you said there when you asked if you're going to do a survey, if you're going to ask people questions about opinions and what you think we should be doing, you only do that if you can follow that up. I mean, in terms of, do you find yourself sometimes pushing back against the idea that we should run a survey about this because you know that you haven't got the resources or the capacity to be able to deal with everything, or is it about how do you manage those expectations? I guess both of your kind of stakeholders but also your audience as well, who you're asking these questions to. Do you find yourself kind of treading that line sometimes between managing, upwards and across ways?
Yeah, usually I'm the one that drives these internal surveys. It's not really the management that is asking for it, but I think
Mm,
that once you're presenting the data to them, um, it helps because they could say, "Oh, okay, this is where we should be going to take our communications to the next level." And also,
yeah,
when they ask for information, they say, "Okay, let's put together this message." And when I can say, well, let's make a video, let's film a video instead, let's make it more visual. And I have the
yeah,
data to back that up, the reasoning why, I'm recommending XYZ. It's because I have the data that I already, got from my survey. And I can tell them, look, this is what our employees are asking more for, or this is how they want us to deliver the information. So yeah, sometimes it's just a matter of I want to do the survey to also be able to capture those trends year over
yeah,
year and see how
yeah.
our workforce is changing. And there's different, obviously, we're dealing with multi generations, different generations in our workforce, and the way that they want to receive information varies, each generation.
Yeah. Well, let's maybe pick up on that because I think that was the next area I'd like to explore with you is what are
Mhm.
some of those insights that you're gaining? Because I know I know yours is a very large and diverse business. I'm sure there are different trends in different parts of your business, but what are
Mhm.
some of those trends that you've been picking up through your measurement activities?
Sure. Yeah. Well, my most recent survey, it revealed that our employees want more infographics, photos,
Okay. Mm.
contests. That's always very popular. Videos. And that's something I'm working on now. Cutting back on text when possible. Of course, that's always a little difficult, especially if, leadership requires that we include certain messages, but
Mm.
replacing it some of this content more with visuals is something that I'm keeping more top of mind because that's what
Yeah.
I've seen. And then, is it more time consuming? Yes, it can be a little more, but I use Canva, the Canva
Yeah.
program for my
Yeah.
graphics. So
Yeah.
that helps me put together, the content in a more visually appealing manner. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's quick. It really isn't that time consuming. I mean, when you're sitting down and writing uh, a, an announcement or a short story for the newsletter that's 250, 500 words, that takes a lot of
Yeah.
time as well. So
Yeah.
the time
Yeah.
you would invest in doing that, instead I'm investing in doing something more visual. But in particular, one group of employees who are, they're always very difficult to measure are our frontline employees. And I think in
Okay.
particular, yeah, our focus groups come in handy with this group, with our frontline. And like I said, maybe it's not a formal roundtable focus group, but more face-to-face interaction where you have
Right.
3 or 4 questions and you can ask them questions that are more geared towards them. So that's always important because obviously the surveys I've sent out, it's always via email to our desktop employees. So I think that
Yeah.
one group that's always hard to reach are those frontline employees.
Yeah, yeah, we've covered that on a couple of, we call them kind of offline employees that, they don't have mobile
Mm-hmm.
devices, they don't have an email address, and
Exactly.
or if they do, they only access it intermittently. And I think it's easy to
Yeah.
forget those guys and ladies as well. So what about what are you finding from your data, if I'm sure you have, in terms of like the kind of remote workers and what they need, how has that been affected, and how has that changed maybe since the kind of pandemic and home working and remote working? I know you've got a lot of people who don't remote work for the reasons you've talked about there in terms of the frontline people, but I guess you've also got a lot of administrative people who have had to kind of decant from the office. Well, any trends there that you've detected?
Yeah, it's like I said, it's very difficult to capture that data from the frontline employees. So we
Mm,
rely very heavily on our HR representatives on the ground, on our supervisors, on them to tell us, to really get a feel for what it is that they want more of in terms of, okay, we want. To have access to this information to our schedule. So as a group, a DPDHL group, we have these past few years have implemented and launched an employee app. So now
right.
our frontline employees, they have access to
Okay.
the intranet content. Yeah. So I think that that's really going to help us. And this year, we're seeing more of our divisions actually conducting our company wide employee opinion survey
Yeah.
on the actual phone. Before it was via kiosks or laptops in our different facilities. So I think that's going to help us a lot. In order for me to carry out my internal com survey, I want to, and I haven't done it yet. I'd like to use our employee app to do that as well. But that
Yeah.
also, in order to incentivize our employees to participate in these surveys, there always has to be an incentive. And I think that it's always helpful to have some type of contest or prize or something to really draw people to the app or to take these surveys. And I've
Yeah.
done that in the past with my surveys. I always include something like, you know, answer these questions and you have a chance to win something. So I haven't been able to really get to the front line with my internal comms survey. But like I said, it's always helpful when I'm in the field to talk to people
Yeah.
and doing
Yeah.
that one-on-one type of interview. So that's one group that I could see our app really helping, and we can gauge their interest and what they're really interested in the future more with our app.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. And what I like there, what you just said there, and you reiterated a couple of times, is the fact that it's not just numbers. There is a qualitative aspect to that, and it's just about
Yes.
talking to people as well. And how do you assimilating that into your kind of knowledge base, so you're making decisions not just based on pure kind of click through rates and things like that, but on organic conversations as well, which I think is really really important. Um, so just bringing things to a conclusion. If someone's looking, there may be people listening to this who are thinking, maybe feeling a bit guilty now that, oh, Andrew's doing all this amazing stuff and we kind of just, don't really do anything. I mean, if you're looking to get started measuring, if you're working in IC and you're looking to try and measure your impact, or looking to improve the quality of measurement, even if you are using it, what would you recommend to someone who's obviously kind of fully bought into the whole measurement of IC and the impact of that IC? Where would you start if you were starting from scratch? And also, if you had some rudimentary measures, what would you kind of recommend to really kind of focus on as the kind of the key areas to get right?
Sure. Yeah, I would say first you have to have a platform that can provide you with reliable data.
Mm,
There are several vendors out there. Second, you want to know what you should be measuring. So, what are the messages that are most important to your stakeholders and the company? And try to test different ways of delivering those messages and see what works best.
mm,
And like I said, maybe it's a short video or an infographic, just creating content in a different way
yeah.
than how you've done in the past. So testing, and it's really important that we stick to certain metrics so we can see patterns over time and to get a good sense of what is resonating with employees.
Hmm.
And we can only see long-term results with time, but I've also learned that it's okay to tweak your metrics if you're
Mm,
not really getting a big picture of how your content is performing.
mm,
So,
mm,
and I've had to do this when measuring like newsletter content across our different business units.
mm.
So, yeah, overall, take the time to analyze your data, identify the root causes of what's not performing well
Yeah.
and what's working well.
Yeah, you've mentioned a couple of times there about and we mentioned Canva. So what sort of platforms can you use to measure? You can use, you imagine you can mention the one you use, but maybe a couple of other alternatives as well in terms of measuring email kind of click through, and particularly then how that flows through onto your intranet. So you've got some sort of analytics there. Well, what a couple of tools that maybe people could look at using?
Yeah, there's a tool that I've heard about, Polite Mail, but I use Banana Tag.
Okay,
We've
yeah,
been using them for a few years, so they can provide a lot of data for you to track emails,
yeah.
and they provide all the metrics that I'm currently using for my reporting.
Yeah, I've heard of banana tag as well, and I'm
Hmm.
sure if people want to search for alternatives, if you type in alternative to banana tag in Google, it usually throws up a few different choices as well. So we're not just advocating that one particular platform. There's many others out there, but yeah, it's that sort of, and I guess as I said, in marketing. World, we've got Mailchimp and things like that, which do similar tools when we're email marketing as well. So okay, yeah. So I think that's a good if people aren't using tools like that. But I think even if you are, I think what you've also talked about there is using them more forensically, and also kind of looking at not just at click through rates. So it's not just using every metric. It's about being discerning about which metrics you use if you're going to go down that route. And then, as you've also said, it's not just relying purely on the data and the numbers. It's actually then following that up with some qualitative conversations, and whether it's focus groups, but it's actually just finding out, why do you think we're getting so many people clicking through to this article at the moment? Why is it that? Why do you think that's interesting for people? And so it's not just the headline. It's the message as well, which I think is really important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, and I've had this also where I've noticed, oh, more creative subject lines. We're getting more
Mm,
clicks, or content focused on people and their stories that helps drive home a message more strongly. So I've had to kind of keeping all those things in mind that I've seen from the data, and try to really create my content along those lines, always keeping in mind, okay, let me be more creative in this
yeah.
way and in my subject, more clickable. But yeah, it's really important overall to analyze and test and
Yeah.
see what's working.
Yeah. Fantastic. So just finally, before we finish, I've just got the question I ask all of my interviewees, which is something that even people who know you quite well, work with you closely, maybe even people in your personal life don't know about you. So maybe something that you're passionate about, something you did when you were younger, or you do now that would be a bit of a surprise to people who maybe even think they know everything about you. So over to you. What are you happy to share with us as your sort of little secret?
Okay, I think most of my colleagues don't know I enjoy belly dancing.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so I've taken a few classes actually for a few years. Not in the last year because of COVID, obviously, but
Yeah.
I'm not great, but I do enjoy it because it is a
Fantastic.
workout. It is definitely
Yeah.
a workout and a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'm not really one to go to the gym, but the belly dancing it's a lot of
Yeah. And so how does that work? Because it's something I know nothing about. So is that like, can you go to like classes and people kind of,
yes.
yeah, okay,
Yep,
okay.
yep. And
Yeah.
then you go to a class, and I've done that at my local. There's a community gym here close to home, so
Yeah.
I've signed up in the past there, and also at some high schools nearby. So,
Oh,
yeah, it's
fantastic.
been fun.
Oh,
Yeah.
brilliant. Well, yeah, oh, yeah. I mean that, and in terms of, have you been kind of doing that virtually as well? Well, as have the people been running online belly dancing classes while the pandemic's been on, like everybody else seems to be done everything online.
Right. No, I haven't taken any virtual classes, but since I taken so many classes in the past, I
Yeah.
practice at home and I have the
Right.
music. Yeah, I download
Yeah.
some music, so
Yeah.
I do practice at home and it's fun. But it is my workout. That's
Wonderful.
what I
Oh,
do.
wonderful. Yeah, yes, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's a good as a first for the show. I can
Okay.
tell you.
Okay, good. I'm unique at least in that regard.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, that's been absolutely fantastic. Well, I'll do, if it's okay with you, Andrea, I'll put a link into your LinkedIn profile in the show notes again, just so if
Sure.
people want to make obviously you can choose to accept or ignore their. But if anyone wants to just find out a little bit more about any of the tools that you talked about or any of the approaches that you've been using, I think it's always nice for them to be able to make direct contact with you. And as I said, we'll put a link into the show notes on this. Is then when I talk about the show notes, I'm talking about the notes on our website, which is engagingic.com. If you want to download that, or if you want to basically read the transcript of the interview, but also see any of the links that we've talked about, they'll be in there. So that is absolutely fantastic, Andrea. I wish you all the best. I wish you obviously the best for the rest of this year, which the kind of global situation seems to be sort of evolving very slowly, but seems to be going in the right direction, hopefully. So I hope all your loved ones and friends and family and colleagues are safe and make it through this year okay, and we can start sort of meeting up again with friends and colleagues around the world before too long without too many restrictions.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you again for inviting me, Craig. It's been a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
yes, and I wish you all the best and your family for the remainder of the year as well. Lots of health.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for sharing your wonderful insights. Thank you, Andrea. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. So, thank you for listening to Engaging Internal Comms. Hope you found this episode useful. We'd love to get your feedback and thoughts about the show. So, and also any questions or ideas that you've got for things you'd like us to cover in future episodes. So, you can email us at info@thebigpicturepeople.co.uk, or you can get in touch with us via the contact form on our website, which is engagingic.com. Also, you'll be able to sign up for our mailing list there, and we'll send you relevant news about the show, new episodes, and also anything that we think you might be interested in when it comes to internal communications or employee engagement. If you like the show and you haven't already done so, please subscribe to it via your podcast service. And also, you can subscribe to it via the links on our podcast page, which again is engagingic.com. If you know anyone else who might be interested in the show, please distribute it to them. Please let them know about it. We want to try and grow a community of people here who are contributing to the show, giving us new ideas for episodes and things that you'd like to cover in future. So thank you very much.